The Fire Within by Krista Lacey. The chapter we're on is Inspiration. It was late afternoon before David returned to Wayward Crescent. The street lamps were flickering to life, and a few dead leaves were skating the pavement. Whistling softly, he opened the gate to Liz's drive. It swung back, not with its usual creak, but with an ear-splitting whine that almost had the tenant jumping into the hedge. He glanced suspiciously at the gate. Either those hinges were in dire need of oiling, or... Nia! The same whine split the air again. It was someone cutting wood with a high-powered saw. Someone like Henry Bacon, perhaps. A light was on in the neighbor's garage, fueled by curiosity, but more by suspicion. David crouched low and crept up to the doors. As he raised his face to the grimy window, a thump of a hammer rattled the glass. Something hit the garage floor with a crash. There was a snapping sound. Mr. Bacon cussed. He tossed his hammer onto a workbench. It hit a box of nails and spilled them onto the floor. David dipped away, frowning hard. Henry was obviously making something, but what exactly it was impossible to say. David shook his head and let it pass. There was no law against people doing woodwork in their garages, even if they were as crazy as Henry. With a shrug, he crossed over onto Liz's drive and let himself into number 42. He had barely finished kicking the mud off his shoes when Lucy came sprinting down the hall to greet him. "Where have you been? School was out ages ago." "I had lunch with the president and walked his dog around the White House." "Liar," said Lucy. "Did you get a book?" A book? David had forgotten the book. Lucy read the defeated expression on his face. "You did go to the library, didn't you?" "Yes," he said. "Thanks for telling me Mr. Bacon works there." He draped his coat over her head and walked on into the kitchen. Something smells good." Down the hall, Lucy shouted, "This coat stinks." "Baked potatoes, sausages, and baked beans," said Liz, pointing a wooden spoon like a wand. "Simple, but filling. How was your day?" "Not bad. Spent most of it in the library Ow!" David started with pain as Lucy jabbed him in the thigh with a lollipop stick. "Hey, that's enough of that," Liz scolded. "He's being horrible," Lucy complained. "He says I didn't tell him about Mr. Bacon." "Oh dear, you found Henry?" "Couldn't miss him," David muttered, glaring at Lucy. "He was at the information desk when I went in specifically to get someone a squirrel book." "Where is it?" Lucy badgered, ever hopeful. They didn't have one. David flicked a breadcrumb at her. Lucy made a moody face and thumped into a seat at the kitchen table. On the table was a half-made dragon, a jelly jar of water, and a number of sticks. Lucy took a finely pointed stick and began to scrape doggedly at a flat piece of clay. David watched in quiet admiration as she turned it into a 3-toed foot. "So what did you think of the gardens?" asked Liz. "Nice," said David, yawning lightly. "I met the library gardener." "Oh, George. He's been there since the place was opened. They grew him from seed, I think. His wife bought a dragon from me once. He's a funny old guy, a little grouchy, but his heart's in the right place." Can't say the same for his timing, David muttered. He told me this peculiar story about everyone in Scrubbly knowing it's 11 when the library clock strikes 3. It's true, muttered Lucy. All the chimes are... All the chimes are wrong. We learn it by heart at school. You have to remember it never bongs 9. That spells doom and gloom, explained Liz. Hasn't anyone thought to repair it? Frequently, said Liz, turning sausages with a fork, but a petition always goes around to leave it be. It's become sort of a tourist attraction. Tricky when the clocks go forward, though. You gain 4 bongs, said Lucy, bending to retrieve a piece of clay. It was then that David noticed 2 complete dragons sitting on the windowsill at Lucy's side. One of them a rather regal-looking creature, bore an uncanny resemblance to Lucy herself. David looked again from a different angle. The dragon had an unusual spikes and scales, and yet, when he stared at it, he clearly saw Lucy. It was almost as if she'd dissolved inside it. The second dragon, by contrast, was a real monster. Its wings were raised, its jaws were opened, and its claws were spread in readiness for battle. David peered into its dark green eyes. They had a strangely disconcerting depth, the sort of eyes that could follow you anywhere. He was pleased Gadzooks didn't look like that. Who are they? He asked. Gawain and Gwendolen, Lucy muttered. What do you think? Asked Liz. She leaned back against the counter, drying pots. David pointed at the scary one. Wouldn't like to meet him down a long, dark alley. That's Gawain, said Lucy. He's very fierce, and he doesn't like jokes. Don't be grumpy, said Liz. What about the other one, David? The tenant sat down in his usual place and turned Gwendolen around to face him. At the risk of getting burnt to a crisp, she really reminds me of Lucy. Lucy dropped her modeling stick. Give or take the odd green scale, of course. For a moment there was silence. David gave an innocuous smile, hoping he hadn't said anything out of place. You never really knew in the Pennycettle household. Dragons were always a ticklish subject. He looked at Lucy. She was gaping at her mom. Liz dried a plate with a slow circular motion of the dish towel. That's very observant, she said. Not many people can see the resemblance. Lucky guess, said David with a nervous shrug. Why did he suddenly get the feeling he'd found the key to some deep, dark secret? He glanced at Gawain and couldn't help but ask, so if Gwendolen is Lucy, then who's... Lucy's eyes opened to the size of saucers. He's... Going upstairs, said Liz, just as the timer on the microwave pinged. But, no buts, it's dinner time. Clear the table. Lucy's shoulders sagged. She looked once at her half-built dragon, blew it a kiss, then squashed it mercilessly into a ball. Liz pulled on a pair of oven gloves and took 3 potatoes out of the microwave. She put them on a baking tray and popped them into the oven to crisp. 5 minutes, she said, and whisked outside with a bag of trash. As the door drifted shut, David tapped Lucy gently on the arm. Who is he, then? He whispered, nodding at Gawain. Lucy bit her lip and glanced outside. The last dragon in the world, she hissed. No, I meant who's he modeled on. Lucy looked at him as if he were an idiot. He's the last real dragon in the world, she repeated. David, none the wiser, changed the subject. Fine. Let's talk about Conker. I want to ask you something important. Have you ever seen him climb since he hurt his eye? Lucy looked faintly puzzled. Up a tree? Fence? Anything? Think hard. Lucy thought for a moment, then shook her head. Why do you want to know? Know what? Said Liz, coming in again. She snatched up a box of cat chow and rattled some into Bonington's dish. Bonington materialized in the kitchen as if he'd beamed down from outer space. I was asking Lucy about Conker, said David. Cruel surprise, said Liz, making Lucy frown. David knocked on the table to get her attention. I saw 2 squirrels in the library gardens. Lucy's eyes lit up. Lucy, I can still see a mess, said her mom. Lucy hurried to the sink with her jelly jar and sticks. What did they look like? She asked. Gray and squirrely, David said unhelpfully. One of them was big and fat. The jelly jar clattered around the sink. Was it Birchwood? Birchwood, David sputtered with laughter. Not unless he caught the bus to Scrubbly. It's quite a trek to the library gardens. Not if you go across the field, said Lucy. She banged her hands down on the counter. That's where they went, Mom. The library gardens. Very nice, said Liz. Now move that clay. Lucy transferred it to a corner of the counter. What did the other squirrel look like? David put his fingers to the corners of his mouth and pushed his lips up into a grin. It smiled like fish. Lucy gaped in astonishment. What's its name? I don't suppose he thought to ask, said Liz. Cutlery, please. Smiler, Lucy shouted, opening the drawer. I bet its name is Smiler. She slapped a fork on the table in triumph. That doesn't sound right, said David. Well, that was Gawain's turn, Lucy said hotly. Big Beam, then? Oh, dear, clucked Liz. Imagine being stuck with a name like Big Beam. Well, that was Gwendolyn's turn. Liz looked at Lucy hard. Then Gawain and Gwendolyn have both gotten it wrong. Lucy, undeterred, had one last option. Can Gadzooks have a try? Pardon, said David. Ask him, said Lucy. How, said the tenant, looking bemused. Lucy paddled her feet. Dream it, she breathed. What? Said David. Mom, make him do it. I'm cooking sausages, Lucy. Oh, Mom, please. Do what? Said David. Lucy threw herself into the chair beside him. It's Mom's special way of telling stories. You have to join and tell what you see. Then the story really comes alive. Things happen. Things you don't expect. Oh, Mom, make him do it. Liz sighed and gave in. David, close your eyes and picture Gadzooks. He looked at her askance. You're not serious. In 30 seconds, your dinner will be burned. That's serious, said David. He closed his eyes. Okay. He's on his windowsill looking out over the garden. I think he's wondering if it's going to rain. No, said Liz. He's biting his pencil. Deep in thought, trying hard to think of a name for your squirrel. Dream it, David. David rocked in his chair and let his mind float. He flipped a page of his notepad over. Gasped Lucy. It's working, Mom. Shush, went Liz. He's writing something. What? Gasped Lucy, too excited to be shushed. David let his imagination flow. To his amazement, he watched Gadzooks take his pencil from his jaws and hurriedly scribble down a name on his pad. Snigger. David's eyebrows twitched in surprise. Liz prodded a sausage or two with a fork. Lucy bit a fingernail. Bonington yawned. The whole Penny Kettle household waited for an answer. Snigger, David whispered. For somewhere came a gentle hurring noise. David's dark blue eyes blinked open. Yes, he said. His name is Snigger.